Hello, thank you for listening to the NextGen Planners podcast. Just a note to add before this episode to give you some extra context. This episode of the podcast was recorded as part of our massive CPD Light Year in a Day event. This was where NextGen Planners ran 11 streams of content for 7 hours in each stream. We had a whole host of fabulous guests, and we can't wait for you to hear these brilliant conversations. Enjoy.
Welcome to the NextGen Planners podcast. NextGen Planners is a financial planning community with a supportive membership that strives for inclusion and best practice throughout our profession and the industry. This podcast is designed to support your always learning mentality by gathering insights from inside and outside of financial services. So sit back and enjoy.
Welcome to your second session for your CPD Light Year in a Day. I hope we all enjoyed our first session and are excited to get going with the next. So this is the NextGen Planners podcast stream. So throughout the day, I'm going to be joined by a whole host of guests talking about a whole host of different things. And this session, we are going to be talking about from buyouts to breakthroughs, and I am joined by the brilliant co-director at Becketts, James Thompson.
Good morning, Amelia. Thanks for having me.
Oh, pleasure. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. It's Friday. It's a little bit rainy out there, but anyway, I'm in my nice office, so happy to be here and looking forward to chatting.
Yeah, me too. I mean, the weather's been so lovely for so long, hasn't it? And so now it's just decided,
gone now.
We're nearly at July, so.
Is summer over? I mean, as long as the second day of the test down at Lord's carries on, then that's all that really matters.
You're a happy man, yeah.
I'm a happy man, exactly.
Perfect. So, to get conversation underway and to kick things off, we always like to ask people that come on our podcast, what does a day in the life look like?
Okay, well, I mean, I'm lucky enough in that I live within half a mile of the office. So, there's always a kind of either a bit of training in the morning or dropping the kids off at school. There's always something going on in the morning. And then pretty much, we most of the team here prefer to come into the office. So there's always a nice busy vibe over here. We've got some lovely new offices and it's a really nice place to be. So typically into the office around 8:30, obviously kind of, one eye on the market, see what's going on there. And then typically into a busy day, whether that involves, client meetings, planning meetings, investment committees, all kinds of different things. Obviously, Dominic and I run the business. So, we're also kind of talking a lot about strategy and growth plans. And there's never a dull day. So, I think a lot of planners out there will be, in a similar position that, we had a bit of a losing streak on the markets for the last kind of 2 weeks or so. So, there's a lot of touch points with clients, a lot of reassurance we're trying to give and giving. So, it's a busy time, definitely. But one eye on August coming up with school holidays, things tend to slow down a little bit. So just pushing out now and getting loose ends tied up prior to August. Have a bit of a break then. All good this end. Thanks.
Nice. Yeah. And I mean, we've got you on the podcast today in the title From Buyouts to Breakthroughs. And so that indicates perhaps, your journey to where you are now hasn't exactly been smooth sailing, business as usual. Let's just get on with the financial planning side of things. So to introduce perhaps everyone to how you've got to be, co-director at Becketts, could you share your personal experience navigating some transitions that you've had to face to get where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, it started, I'm a bit of a, I kind of see myself as a bit of a, an old warrior in the industry. I'm sure, obviously this is a next gen platform. So I'm sure some of your listeners are perhaps a bit younger than me. I actually joined the industry back in 2004. So just prior to the global financial crisis. And it was a different place back then. Even to the extent that, you think of things now like online valuations, correspondence methods, whether it be email, WhatsApp, all kinds of different, instant And even though those were around back then, a lot of it was written correspondence, phone calls, meetings. It was just, a very different place. But I joined a large local practice, and that practice really had grown up through pension consultancy. It was actually a kind of SIPSAS provider, wealth management, and again, back in the kind of early 2000s, financial planning wasn't really a thing. It was very much based around the wealth management, the kind of the investment side of things. I mean, we the department that I joined was actually called the investment department. We ran bespoke portfolios for people, and it was only really through the training and through the CII and the kind of the chartered route that actually I started to pick up on, well, wait a minute, what's the reason for investing? Why are we actually investing money for people? And, it was quite, in a way, it was a little bit, certainly within that firm anyway, a bit of a pioneer in terms of actually kind of transitioning from wealth management to the combination of wealth management and financial planning. But yeah, what transpired really was that I moved up the ranks pretty quickly at my firm. It was founded by two chaps who there'd already been some buyouts within the firm. So there was a second kind of cohort of directors, if you like, director owners, and then I was part of this younger third round that were invited to join a management buyout. So in the end, 6 of us, led by 2 senior partners, 4 junior partners. I was one of the junior partners. This is back in 2011, around that time. We're invited to join the buyout, and it was amazing. It was one of the most exciting periods of my life. I was getting married. We had our first child on the way, and then all of a sudden I'm a shareholder director in a really successful financial planning firm, and it felt really, really good. And the idea then was that we'd kick on as a buyout team and push the business forward. And I wouldn't say there was even really any plans, any major plans. The 2 senior partners were a bit older, so there was a lot of talk. Well, we might just do another buyout down the line, but in a way we were kind of. I say, I'm not going to use the word victims, because we're not absolute victims at all, but we were very successful, and it attracted interest at a level. And as we get into kind of 2013, 14, 15, obviously interest rates very low. It was the start of a lot of PE money, a lot of consolidation going on in the market. And ultimately there were offers coming in for the business that, initially we were turning away. But they kind of got to a point where, they can't be ignored really. And ultimately, we went through a sale process to a consolidator, a large national PLC firm. And, it was just that change in culture. I'd come from a business that I knew I'd grown up in. I'd kind of got round the boardroom table, which is where I always wanted to be. And then all of a sudden I'm only like 3 or 4 years later, I'm resigning my directorship, and I'm back on like a sales team, and it was never that kind of way that I envisaged it. So that was the trickiest bit for me, just that change in culture. I mean, the business that bought us was a very successful business and some great people there, but it just didn't fit with the way that I wanted to be really, and my lifestyle. So. Yeah, I'd known Dominic at Becketts for a long, long time, and Becketts is in my hometown, so I knew all about it, and we took a lot of time and really spent a lot of time together. But ultimately, it's like a breath of fresh air for me, just being here and kind of almost back to where I was in 2004. That kind of start of a real exciting growth path.
Yeah, and I guess it's just not really what you expect if you kind of come up in a business and then you do this management buyout and you think, okay, right, I'm set, I know where I am, I know how this works, and I'm happy to kind of build from there. And then you get hit with something that you weren't necessarily expected, and you weren't really promised either. Not that anybody can give you a absolute guarantee, but it's different to what you expected.
Yeah, so I think you've hit the nail on the head in that I think even as a young planner and being relatively naive, you just envisage that things will stay. And this kind of can transpose across into planning and wealth management. You think at an early stage that things will just stay as they are, but actually the reality is that things change, and things can change quickly, and you've just got to adapt, and you've got to, it was a stressful time. It was also an exciting time, but it was that shift across into a PLC world. Obviously, shareholder value is everything, sales. And it just, but they were also a business that, like a lot of consolidated businesses, they were a business that had grown very quickly. So I'd say that their infrastructure in the background, they would just like land grab it and bang, bang, bang. What can we grab hold of here? But yet they didn't really have the systems in the background. I mean, they've done, they're still a very successful business, but I think in a way we were like I can't remember exactly, maybe like the third or fourth acquisition. And with all these things, what tends to happen is they go a bit crazy on the first one. So they do nothing on the second one, try and leave them alone. The third one, they don't really know what to do because the first two have had issues. And it just takes time for them to settle the businesses in. And we were probably on the tail end of that, really. So you just learn that actually, sometimes you're out of control. You can't control what's going on, especially when you're a junior partner. You're basically not really in control. So, but
Definitely.
There's not a lot you can do about it. In a way, what I did at that stage was just get back to, okay, because when you're a planner and you're a wealth manager, that's fine. That's your day job. But then when you're running a business as well, that's another day job. Okay. So it's you add that into the mix, and then all of a sudden I'm like, well, do you know what? I can actually take a step back from running the business now, because technically it's not my business anymore. And actually I'm going to see this as a positive in that I can focus solely, on the clients, the client bank, the families, the outcomes, all this type of thing. So there's obviously another focus that you can, and that's, we kind of spoke about this prior to the call. How did I manage that transition? Well, it's just that focus on the clients, on the outcomes, on good returns, on, that side of things.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll definitely talk more about the client side of things, because I think that's an incredibly important thing to focus on in terms of these transitions and movement. But what I wanted to pick up from what you just said there is, having, been bought by somebody, how long did you stay after that? What was that like? And what actually prompted the decision to go, no, I don't want to be here anymore. This isn't for me. I'm going to look elsewhere.
Yeah, it's a brilliant question. I mean, the reality is, when I look back, I think pretty much on day one, I was like, this, I don't think this is going to work for me. I could just sense the way that it was going to go. I mean, obviously with any transition, with any kind of purchase, there's legals and contracts, and they can add a dynamic that means there's got to be a time period on various fronts. So that obviously requires diligence and respect as well. But I pretty much knew it was a number of years that I stayed for various reasons. And then what kind of made me go really was that relationship with my co-director now was, I could tell it was strong. I could tell we think the same way. And just the benefits, really. I mean, my old practice was even, it was not that far away. It was like 15 miles, but it could take 45 minutes, there, and 45 minutes. But that's an hour and a half, when you, it kind of got to the stage. This is pre-pandemic, of course. So, there was no working from home. It was in the office every day. There's an hour and a half in the car. I'd never actually dropped either of my kids off at school prior to being on garden leave, because it was just busy. And so even that potential to shift my work-life balance by being half a mile away, because I started at Becketts January 2020. So that was kind of pre-pandemic. So, that there has been a shift now to more flexible working because of the lockdowns. But, I'd say that there was a culture that I just, it's worked for some people. A lot of my ex-colleagues. I mean, I was there at my old practice for 16 years, so I was kind of man and boy. I grew up in there. It was my baby. I'd helped grow it. It was really, really hard. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I'd never, it was my first job as well, so I didn't even really know how to do it or what, and it just felt weird. And one of the downsides of our industry is that unfortunately there's no room for sentimentalities. There's no, the day that I gave notice was like, right, leave your phone, leave your laptop, and go home, and don't talk to anybody. And you're like, wow, I've been here for 16 years. That's it. That's my exit. You're out the back door. Your colleagues you've worked with for 16 years. I mean, obviously they, subsequently get in touch, but even they get told, don't contact him. And then all of a sudden garden leave is one of the strangest experiences I've ever had. It's like the world's revolving, and you're in space watching it revolve. It's weird. It's one of the weirdest things ever, because you've just got to sit there and do nothing. So which some people might like, but not. I didn't like it. I got a good tan, and I was on my bike a lot, but other than that, it's weird. I'm rambling a bit here. Yeah.
It's great. But to have that kind of experience and go through those transitions, I think is interesting for people to hear about, because a lot of the time, people will stay in the same place for a while, or it might not have the same kind of attachment to a place and move around. But to navigate that and navigate, having the same clients for 16 years potentially, and then shifting all of that and going, okay, well, don't talk to them, lose contact. It's a hard thing to work out how to do well, because it is.
And I didn't have any, I'd not done it before, and I'll never do it again. So it was like, okay, there comes a point where I just knew that I just couldn't have stayed there. It just wasn't for me. I've always wanted to be around the boardroom, and within a PLC world, there's pretty much zero chance. It's a 500-man company. I could probably work for 10 years and get into some form of senior management. That was the way I saw it. So the culture just wasn't right for me. And like I say, that shift for the work-life balance as well. So, but then there comes a point where you think, I've got to back myself here. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how it will transpire. I don't know how the transition will go. I was lucky enough in that Dominic and Becketts were just amazing. Just like, and to be honest, it was the first time that the Becketts have been through it in terms of taking on, a senior advisor, another director. But Dom just backed me all the way and just said, listen, what will be, will be. We'll smash it. We're a business going places anyway. So listen, whatever happens, we'll make it work between us. And we have done. We've taken some brilliant steps, but the infrastructure was all there. It's a superb business. So I was quietly confident, but you've no idea.
Yeah, you never know, do you? You're still walking into a situation, again, no guarantees. You can have an idea of what it might be like. But I do want to focus on kind of the client side of things now. And firstly, from the first company side of things, and then also from joining a new company with new clients. And so I know you said, put your phone down, don't contact any clients, don't talk to them. How did that feel, firstly, from that side of things? And do you know how, that things were communicated to them? Did you have any say over how things were communicated? Or was it just, no, that's it?
No, obviously you have no say over how it's communicated, because the day you give notice, you're out the office. So, you have an idea of probably what's going to happen, in that, phone calls will be made pretty quickly, or they should be pretty quick. In hindsight, obviously, as clients choose to come across and continue to work with you, you do get an idea of what happened in that meantime. And it's the right thing that, the clients were contacted and they were introduced to a new advisor, and obviously the new advisor tries their very best to kind of get in there and develop a relationship as quickly as possible, really. And the reality is that works sometimes. Some not every single client transitions across. It's the client's decision ultimately. It's a funny one, but as you say, for the garden leave period, I'm just on the outside of it and just, okay, let's just see how it transpires when I'm back in, I'm back in business and kind of ready to look after people again. And, I think it's very cliched, but people do buy people at kind of the level that we work at, the kind of very highly complex, multi-tax entity, there's a lot of interaction between business, personal, trust, pension. I think you build knowledge and experience within the family structure that ultimately has a value. And, it's hard to kind of come in and immediately replicate what I've been doing for all those years. So, that stands you in pretty good stead. But ultimately, day one, 1st of January 2020, it wasn't the 1st of Jan, the middle of Jan, I think it was, came in for my first day here, and right, let's wait for the phone to ring, basically. And luckily it did.
Yeah. And so talk to me more about that side of things, from building client relationships that had some existing advisors. Did you have some passed over to you? Was it all, brand new leads? Was it trying to accumulate your own bank?
Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing is that, even during garden leave, I was receiving, brand new kind of client, just through networks and contacts. And so, by the time I actually started here, I could hit the ground running. And, there was a combination really of just, there was pent up demand for the type of advice that I give and that Becketts gives as well. So there was a kind of a whole new cohort of, brand new clients that were ready to be seen and kind of brought on board, really. And then just, in time, really, existing clients from the old practice, a number of them made contact. And, then obviously the discussion takes place about joining us here. But I think clients got, the clients that I'd known for a long time, they got it. They got why, that I got as far as I wanted to get. At my old place, and that it was a big job. I mean, a lot of, I kind of just going back a little bit, we had to, obviously the day that we were purchased, there was a day there where you had to ring around the client bank and tell them that we've been purchased, and the overriding reaction to that was a bit of sadness, I'd say. And I think the clients had bought into the old practice. The practice was named after its two founders, and it felt like it wasn't a family business, but it felt like a family business. And clients wanted, it'd been in existence since the late 70s. So it was an established name, and the clients wanted to see us succeed. And I think that shift to a name that they didn't know wasn't taken very well. So when I'm having the conversation to them about Becketts, I mean, Becketts got a great history. It was Beckett is the maiden name of Dominic's mum, Lorraine, who ran an accountancy practice and developed into financial services. It's a brilliant story, and they got it. They got it, and if they bought into that, then it was a pretty easy transition.
Nice. And so I guess looking at the time scale of things, then January 2020 is an interesting time to have joined a company.
Yeah.
You're obviously 3 months in and pandemic. You've just arrived. what was that like?
Yeah. I mean, I suppose the good news is that between January and March, there was a big, there was a lot of influence. That's kind of when, the clients that were going to make contact did make contact, and, things happened in that period, really. So, but obviously it was ticking away in the background. I mean, one of the things I remember only like a week or two in fact, not even that, maybe like a week in, was Dominic heading, he's got his laptop and he's heading off into a meeting room. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm going on Zoom. So this is pre-pandemic. And I'm going, I went, what's Zoom? And he's like, oh, it's like a video conferencing. I'm like, oh, like Skype. I always remembered Skype. I've never used it, but like Skype. Oh yeah, we don't use Skype. We use Zoom. I'm like, I've never heard of Zoom. And he went, oh yeah, I do loads of Zoom calls. And he was in the office and he'd done his little Zoom, little catch up with the clients. So, and even like, the business has already transitioned to the cloud. So no servers, everything was cloud-based, hosted desktops was already in play. So as kind of March came around, I'd already been doing a few kind of days working from home, set up the home office, because I'd only just moved into my new house as well at the same time. There was so much going on.
All changed.
It's all a blur now. But anyway, we'd set up the home office and got it all running. So if I'm kind of honest, and I don't mean to kind of sound blasé, but we were ready. We didn't know it, but we were ready. In March 19th or whatever it was, Boris's, I think I'd actually gone, I think Boris's lockdown was on the Friday. I think on the Tuesday, I'd already said to Dom, dude, I'm not, I can see where this is going. I think I'm going to go and set up from home, and, set up from home, got everything running. So it was, we were running, kind of team Zoom calls already at that point. So it wasn't, I mean, obviously you had the market kind of crash, the market dropped by about 25% in the space of a couple of weeks. But the interesting thing there is that a lot of the families that had come across with me were actually in cash at that point, because I was shifting them from one platform to another. So there was a bit of fortune there, literally a bit of fortune. So, I think thereafter it was, it's obviously managing expectations. We're in a new world, but 2020 turned into a really good year for us. It didn't get in the way at all. And we've really kind of pushed on since then. So yeah, it's weird. It kind of feels like another life, doesn't it? But it
does. And I think, from what I'm hearing as well, it's so much to do with the existing relationship you had with Dom that made that kind of transition easier. Because if you hadn't had that kind of existing relationship with the person you were running a company with, then 3 months in, you're still kind of in that probationary-ish zone where you're deciding, what is this, how's this going to work? But because of that, it sounds like it was pretty smooth.
It was. I mean, maybe I'm kind of got rose tinted glasses on here, but it didn't feel like a. Yeah, I mean, we knew pretty early on in our discussions that we had a strong understanding. We've always had a very open relationship. We can. I remember saying to me on day one, anything's on your mind, you bring it out, you put it on the table, and we just get nothing confessed there. And that's a culture within our business that, if anyone feeling, the slightest bit aggrieved or challenged or, it comes out, and there's no stigma. It's like, let's just get it out and deal with it. So we always had that, and we'd got ourselves in such an understanding position, but it was exciting as well. It was like, it was nice to see it build and just, it was kind of good fun in a kind of slightly odd way. I mean, my wife's a teacher, so she was off, and the kids were both off from school. And it was amazing. Do you remember the weather was unbelievable, wasn't it? Yeah. I just remember that, and I'm in my home office, like slogging away. And I mean, loving it, but slogging away. And they're in the back garden in the paddling pool. I kind of remember it now, really. There's always that, especially like when you're on garden leave, you always have that, one of the ways to deal with the uncertainty of the transition is to have a plan B in mind. What if it doesn't work? What am I going to do? I'll go and do something. I don't know what it'll be. I'll find something to do. I was like, maybe I'll be a university lecturer. I was thinking of all kinds of different things, and you do think, well, actually, I probably wouldn't have been working. I'd have been off with like everybody, like a lot of other people.
Yeah.
Might have been some benefit in that, but no, I think looking back, it was exciting. I think pretty early on, I had an idea of the momentum. I had an idea of who who'd been in touch with me, and it felt like, yeah, this is going to work. This is going to work. And then just the new business we had on tap, and we just hit a bit of a rich seam of new business, really. And I think the other thing that's worked really well is that we do a lot of joint meetings. We do a lot of joint proposal meetings together, and we're pretty formidable, really, when we go in together. There's not a lot that we can't really answer. So there was just synergy and benefit from that. So
I think it's a really nice story for people to hear as well. It's a daunting thing to leave somewhere that's established and move somewhere else, especially when you've got to a point where you have a bank of clients that you're really invested in and you care about, and you develop that to start from scratch almost again.
Yeah.
But to see that there's a way of navigating that isn't. It can be a good story. It can be
absolutely can be a good story. And I hadn't spoken to anybody else about it, and I can't really. A lot of my colleagues stayed on and have done really, really well. So, but a few had left, and I think, I don't really know their stories, but I think if you're a good person, ultimately, if you're good and you want good outcomes and you care, I mean, that is the way that we see ourselves here. We care, we're not enjoying it at the moment in terms of some of the returns, and, the markets aren't returning the, exactly what we want, and we see that, and it makes us upset, and so all we can do is be there with our clients. But I think ultimately that that kind of sympathetic side, if you kind of, it'll come back to a little bit to one of my favorite books, but if you're a good person and you care and you're doing the right things at the right time, it'll stand you in good stead. And we knew that, and that's the way that we kind of, on a daily basis, that's the way we like to live our business lives, and and our family lives as well, that just do the right thing. And ultimately you'll be okay.
Yeah, and you've now got this really unique kind of objective perspective on how to handle these kind of transitions and what it's like from both sides, from leaving and joining. From this perspective, do you have kind of advice that you might give to a firm who has somebody leaving? How do you think people should communicate these things to clients? How important is that open communication in these times of transition? And obviously this will go and feed into, there's always different types of transition throughout life. And
I think it's a very tricky one, really, because it depends where the client sees their, do they see their planning within the company, or do they see their planning within the individual? And you can't, there's no right or wrong answer there. So, in terms of a company, kind of protecting itself from an advisor leaving, it is a tricky one. I mean, we very much, just see it as, well, we just want to have such an open environment and a pleasing and rewarding environment to work in, that's how we see it. That actually, if our advisors are comfortable and happy and rewarded, and then we don't give them much reason to want to go anywhere else. I mean, ultimately, if they were to go, and if they've done it, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, really, because if they've done a really good job and they're close to their clients, which we want all of our advisors to be close to their clients, then clients some will follow them. But ultimately, we also believe that build a great brand, build a great culture, that you also stand a good chance that clients will say, well, Becketts is the home for me because I like the way they provide their service, and I like the outcomes that I'm getting. So we don't really have, I don't have any advice for on that respect, because I was on the other side of it. But yeah, I know what some of the facts. It's funny. It's like, because I care, some of the families I was really close to, they did stay, and you do, I still think about them now, and I think, well, ultimately they chose the institution over the individual, and that's completely fair enough, and that will happen.
Yeah, and to have that kind of resilience to that as well, and understanding that if you are a good advisor and good at your job, there's going to be opportunity to build that up again and nurture new relationships. And also, likewise, if you're a really good firm, if you've got a really good company, then you'll have people come to you as well. So there's enough. If you're both doing it well and understanding and making clients feel supported in different ways, then there's no reason to have that kind of conflict necessarily.
I completely agree that there's opportunities out there, and if you set yourself up in the right way, then there's no reason that you can't go and capture that, whether it's existing clients you've dealt with before, or whether it's new clients that you go out and find. I think you've got to just back yourself and know that you'll do well, and that people will buy you. The vast majority of my new clients come on board from my existing client bank.
Right.
Yeah, probably 70-80%. I mean, we have really close relationships with introducers, and we have quite a strong online presence as well. We have lots of different ways in which we can attract new clients. But yeah, ultimately, at various intervals, I get introduced to someone's friend or someone's work colleague or whatever it is, and that's great. I love that.
Yeah. And so I guess an interesting question then is, would you encourage people to consider moving if they're not happy? And alternatively, what do you think firms can do to try and keep hold of good people?
I think the answer to that is probably yes. I mean, I think in any walk of life, if you're not, I'm not a kind of YOLO. Well, lots of people say YOLO or FOMO or whatever you want to, however you want to term it. But probably, now that I'm thinking about it, I did ultimately come to the conclusion that life is a bit too short to be somewhere you're not really enjoying being, and so I think whether it's in any kind of walk of life, if something doesn't quite feel right, then why wouldn't you make a change and go and change it and put it right? So I think, I wouldn't want to encourage anyone to leave any kind of position, but I did it, so I suppose why wouldn't I recommend it for anyone else? And then transverse. I think the biggest challenge that Becketts, we are a growing business. We are developing our brand, our proposition all the time. I think that growth path, that's probably going to be our biggest challenge in terms of keeping the great culture we've got, and just especially if you as and when satellite offices and different workplaces, and how do you keep that? And I saw that was a big challenge in the national that brought us, keeping that consistency, and not but not being too, but having individuality as well. It's an absolute, an absolute minefield, and being in a compliance-led industry as well. It's a really hard thing to do. So, I think that the culture has to be right. To keep good people. Reward, obviously. Culture and reward. Fairness, all these types of things. It's again comes back to just doing the right thing, being good and doing the right thing. You're probably going to be okay.
Yeah. So there are 2 questions now that we ask everybody who come on our NextGen Planners podcast.
Yes.
And the first question of that is, do you have a book that has helped you in your career so far? And if so, what is it?
So my career is quite interesting because my granddad, my dad's dad, he was actually he set up business in the 1970s. In fact, maybe even earlier than that, the kind of life assurance boom. He was basically a life assurance salesman and ended up with quite a big practice and sales. It's kind of door to door, like man from the Prue type stuff. Mm-hmm. And it morphed more into a general insurance type business. So when I like a lot of us in this industry, kind of dropped into it a little bit. I did take an accounting and finance degree, but ultimately I dropped into the industry from a kind of another industry. So I dropped into it and I spent a lot of time with my granddad because he'd be like, he couldn't quite understand our model, with obviously we were fee based back in the early pre-RDR. NextGen, a lot of your advisors, your planners won't know what RDR is, but anyway, pre-RDR, we were already a fee based wealth management practice. So we were quite ahead of the time, but my granddad never really got it because he was a commissions man. So we used to have loads and loads of chats, and one day he'd kind of wandered off into his study and come back, and he had this book, yellow and black book, and he put it down and he said, "This is what you need to read." And it was How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, which is like written. I think the first version was 1919, something like that. It's over 100 years old, this book.
Wow.
Absolutely amazing. And it was the first book that I read. At that time, in the kind of the early 2000s, it was all, kind of Donald Trump. Your business leaders were Alan Sugar. All these kind of like basically very macho, very this is how you do business. Stamp, stamp, stamp. And this was the first book that said, just be nice. Being horrible in business, creating bitterness between relationships just won't stand you in good stead along the way. Yeah. It's such a good book. And I read it, and it was the first book that I read that I'm like, have a smile on your face and just be happy with what you're doing. And if you're not happy, then perhaps you're not doing the right thing. And it was the first thing that I'd read. I can't believe it was over 100 years old, and it was saying all these things. It's a brilliant book. In fact, the other day, I took out some messages. We had like a bit of a team away day, and I was just telling the guys there, some of the younger guys in the office, that this is a brilliant book, because you think it's going to say, growth at any price and, kind of kill your opposition and all this type of stuff, but it doesn't. It says just be a nice person, and that kind of accords with the way that we do business. So that's great. But just if I can throw another one in there, one that I've read. Of course, yeah. One that I've read recently is Empire of Pain, which is the story of the Sacklers in America, and this kind of the marketing and the influencing of kind of physicians around the drug industry, which ultimately led to this kind of opioid prescription drug abuse in the US in the 90s, and that is kind of that's a bit. I mean, in a way, it's a manual of how you can get incredibly wealthy, but it's just the wrong way. But the way that they did it is absolutely incredible. It's an amazing book. It's more a kind of warning from business than an actual do this in business, but an incredible story, and still kind of going on today, the ramifications of it. So really interesting read.
Yeah, they both sound great. I mean, the How to Win Friends and Influence People, I thought was way more modern than 1919. I've heard that.
I haven't got it up in front of me, but it was early 20th century.
you just think, what was that like then? What must have been like in that time to grow a business? It's fascinating that it's still.
You know what? It accords so well. Even take out all the technological advancement. It reads like you can read it like it would be today. It's a really, really interesting read. Honestly, it's not a massive publication. I mean, it's one of the world's best sellers. It's an unbelievable business manual. But yeah, I'd recommend it. It's a great read.
Yeah, I've heard lots of people talk about it. I've never read it, but now knowing that it comes from that, it makes me really want to read it now. Actually, to see there must be just some universal principles in there that just make sense and are applicable for anything.
It is honestly, it's great. It just says to subphrase it, just have a big smile on your face all the time is the way that I read it. So it works for me.
Perfect. So final question for you then, James Thompson, is what are you most excited about to see in the world of finance in the next 10 years? I
think, for want of a better, I'd love to see a plan come together. That's the kind of Hannibal from A-Team catchphrase, but it's the planning that we do with clients. I mean, the plan, like any good plan, the plan should be 20% planning and 80% execution. Because you've got to don't spend 80% of your time planning and 20% executing, because the world changes. So don't try and plan exactly for the next 20, 25. This is what we do with clients, but we set off with a direction in mind. And what I love is when those plans come to fruition. This is like, it's like these plans that these clients that have already transitioned and those plans have come to fruition, but also, the way we are as a young business is that we've got plans that are in play, that are due to kind of mature. And that for me is super exciting. One of the bits, and I'm sure, any planner who's listening along, watching along to this will agree with me, is that moment when, the power that we have to say to a family or a client that, for example, you can retire, when they just don't know, when they know they've got resource, but they don't know what it means or what it does. And I don't know if I've got enough and I'm still working, but I'm not enjoying it. And they're sat around the boardroom table and we go, no, we're telling you, you've got do this, do that, get the plan in place. Look at this, this is a conservative, well thought out financial plan. You can give notice if you want. And that moment when they ring back and they say, I've done it. I've handed in my notice. I'm going to retire. There's obviously nervousness and excitement at the same time, but those are the moments that just make the job so worthwhile when you actually change someone's life. Because otherwise, they'll say to me, otherwise I'd have carried on going. I'd have carried on for another 2-3 years, and I really wasn't enjoying it. I'm like, no, go on holiday, go and play golf, go out on your bike, whatever, go and walk the dog, whatever makes you happy. So it's those things that come along. And obviously there's a lot of talk of chatbot and AI, and it's a super hot topic at the moment. And there's areas of the business that can definitely be improved and deliver some good outcomes. But I don't think the collaboration aspect of what we do, the level at which we're working, the level of intricacy and complexity, I don't see that, the sitting down of us and our clients and that interaction, that for me is not at risk. That is like that they value. That is this obviously consumer duty. We've done a lot of work on how can we put a value on that, and we're pretty confident we have done. But that for me is that's the exciting thing. Just using technology in the right way, but just those relationships as they go along is and those plans that come to fruition. That for me is a key part of the role.
Amazing. Well, I think that's a really, really lovely place to end it. So I will just say thank you very much, James. It's been a pleasure chatting with you this morning, and thank you for joining me.
No, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed that.